Wonderful. It's fine. So like I said, this is being recorded, and we'll have it on our YouTube channel later on tonight. I'm just going to start playing the presentation here that we've got for the distillery itself, and let's see if we can do that. Hopefully everybody can hear this when it comes on.
A great whisky is made up of three things. It's made up of complexity, it's made up of balance, and it's made up of character.
Whiskey is the language I express things in. I like to express emotion.
A great whisky is made up of three things. It's made up of complexity, it's made up of balance, and it's made up of character.
Whiskey is the language I express things in. I like to express emotions, ideas, feelings through the language of whiskey.
Yes, there's a scientific approach to it, there's a science to it, but it's also an art. And it's so important to realise that whiskey is made by people. The whiskey maker's personality is really important to the entire process because they're dictating the flow and the character and the flavours of whiskey.
In traditional whiskey making, there are different people responsible for different parts of the process. At the Lakes, we believe in holistic whiskey making. So Darrell, our whiskey maker, is responsible for the whole continuum.
Single malt whiskey is all about flavor. You make spirit is my canvas. What you do is you use colors, which are the flavors that you see around, to create your masterpiece. And the strokes, individual strokes of that art are what a blender brings to the table. Those are the creative personal influences that they bring. At Lakes, we focus on maturation and the blending to create, enhance, and contrast those flavors. You can kind of control all parameters and create the flavor you're looking for.
You can be conventional by following an existing path, or you can take a more philosophically interesting position and actually go, I want to make something that is different, that is personal. And that's very much the path that Darrell's taken.
I respect the traditional whiskey making process, but I think it is not only looking at what whiskey is, but what whiskey can be. And that is the approach that we are bringing in at Lakes. Ultimately, I want a whiskey that creates an emotional impact on the person drinking.
We at Darrell's almost like turned whiskey on its head, and the idea that the wood and the oak in particular is a contributor to the subtleties of flavour. I don't know anybody else in the world who's doing this.
All whiskies use oak maturation to create and enhance and smoothen out flavors. But at Lakes, what we do is try to use oak to create a spectrum of flavor profiles, a palette of an artist with different dried fruit characters, tropical fruit characters, and those all are created using different spectrum of oaks. I've taken inspiration from élevage technique, which is from the cognac and brandy makers, where you have an active involvement in maturation, where you try to move the liquid around to layer it with different flavor profiles. Someone once said, write the book you want to read, and this is a whiskey I want to drink.
As well as the physical geography of the Lake District and the beauty and source of inspiration that it provides us with, the microclimate in the world of whiskey making is incredibly important. The interaction of spirit, wood, and air has a huge role to play in the contribution of what makes the Lake single malt so unique. Our environment is adding flavour whilst our whiskey is maturing.
For me, this is a very creative and artistic process, and Lakes gives me the opportunity to tap into the creative realm very easily, because this is a very serene environment. I think my hopes and ambitions are that, first of all, we establish Lakes as one of the best sherry matured single malts in the market. And in the process, also not only put Lakes, but also England on the map as one of the finest whiskey producing regions.
Here he is. I think he's managed to get in.
I'm in. Morning, everyone. Evening. And huge apologies. Huge apologies.
No worries
One
at all.
one of those mornings where technical issues plagued me just at the wrong time. So my sincere apologies to you all.
No worries at all. Thanks for joining us. I know you're a busy man at the moment. I think you've got appointments back to back every day. So it's good to see you on here.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now, I think we've been sitting waiting with some whiskies in front of us at the moment, so I think we get filed into one of them. Which one should we start with out of this lineup that we've got here today?
Yeah. So in front of you, you'll have a range of our blended whiskies as well as some of our single malts. And I would suggest if we start with either the one orange wine cask finish or the one muscatel cask finish. Let's go with the muscatel cask finish to start with. These are, the lighter whiskies to begin with. Have you already dived into any of them or spoken about any of these while we've gone?
We haven't. I've just really been holding the fort, talking about the industry and how well England's doing at making whiskey at the moment, which is a bit terrifying for a Scotsman.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I fired over that video as part of a presentation last night, Craig. Have you got that?
I do.
Presentation?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So whenever you need to use that, I can.
Would you be able to put it up for us, please?
Definitely.
Because
I'll do that.
What I'm keen to do is just set the scene and just reiterate some of the points that the video has just made for us before we dive into talk in detail about the products that we've got in front of us. So just by way of introduction, and again, apologies for my lateness. I'm Andy, and I look after all our international business at the Lakes. Currently, we operate in about 25 markets globally. UK is obviously our biggest market, and we're expanding really quickly. So I'm super excited that we've got you guys in Australia talking this morning, because you know what, sooner rather than later, I'm really hopeful that our range will be available in your market. So what a great way to kind of introduce what we do and what we have to all of you guys. Am I driving, Craig, or are you driving?
I think I'm driving because it's on my computer. So yeah, so I can just go through that. We've already played the video, Andy. So
yeah, I came in halfway through the video, which is great. That's brilliant. Loads of good messages come out of that video. Okay, so this is our home, and our home, as you've seen on the video, is an old Victorian model dairy farm, and that's what it looks like today. We get around 150,000 visitors a year to our distillery, and that is, a huge part of that visitor number is our international guests. We're located in the biggest national park in England, in the Lake District. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So lots of, inspiration has been taken from that geography, from William Wordsworth, who was born in the region, to other artists, writers, poets, painters, and it's this environment that we are really privileged to be situated in. So we're really lucky to be where we are. But if you flick onto the next slide, you'll see what that distillery used to look like when, or after the video, I think it is. Oh yeah, or maybe it's not. So that distillery now was derelict in the late 90s. It'd been derelict for about 20 years. And there's a guy called Paul Curry, who was involved in the Arran Distillery. He founded the Arran Distillery with his father in the 90s. He came across this derelict dairy farm by the side of a river and thought, you know what, this looks like a brilliant place to make a distillery. And I you know, have grown up in the Scotch whisky industry. I think it'd be great to build this distillery in England. We're about 50 kilometers from Scotland, so lots of the microclimate, or the climate and the microclimate, are very similar to what you would find in certain areas in Scotland. So lots of similarities, lots of water, lots of rain. We're in the wettest part of England. So therein was the seed of, you know, this is what we're going to do, and this is where we're going to build our distillery. That was in 2009-10. We kicked things off in 2011. Huge restoration work. It's a grade 2 listed building, so we weren't permitted to build 1 centimeter higher or 1 centimeter wider than the footprint of the distillery, of the original building. So our distillery was, and all the components and stills and whatever else that we needed to put to make our distillery, had to fit the building and not the other way around. So some quite interesting quirks in our distillery in terms of, you know, the angle of the swan neck and things like that are probably different to what you would normally expect, but it's what the constraints of our building. So that was 2011. We were founded. Huge restoration. You know, each and every stone, when we had to rebuild the wall, had to be numbered so that they were replaced back in exactly the same place. Huge painstaking operation. We started distilling at the end of 2014. So all the whiskies that you'll taste today, you know, if you want to ask me how old they are, they can't be any older than December 2014. So that's where we're coming from. So huge admiration for Scotch whisky. You know, really respectful of those traditions and that centuries of craftsmanship. But actually, as an upstart from the new whiskey world, we're trying to do things that can elevate us and help us beat that hugely credible, historic whiskey industry and beat them at their own game after 10 years. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's quite good because like the competition's always good, but I always find that with Scotland, there's all these traditions that, you know, people go by this tradition that each distillery has to be the same all the time as well. You know, like they've never changed anything. So I think in Scotland, the future of a lot of distilleries is a new distillery that's coming up, because they tend to have a little bit more room to create something new and sort of more modern for the more modern palate. Whereas the distilleries that have been there for years have to use the same process, have to use the same spirit they've been making, and haven't really changed much.
Yeah. And that's, you know, and that's not no bad thing. It's just we've got the opportunity as a brand new distillery that's not in Scotland to do things in a slightly different way, and that's what we're trying to do, for sure.
It's a beautiful building, absolutely amazing building. It's been so well looked after in the renovation as well. So.
Look, thank you. Everything that we do, from the experience you get on site. So, you know, we've won the Visit Britain Gold Award for a tourist destination a number of times. Here you can see loads of awards for the distillery and some pictures there of what it used to look like, the cow sheds and whatever else. You know, painstaking, but everything that we're doing there, every touch point that we have to, you know, we're trying to make sure that the experience is brilliant, whether you're at the distillery or drinking one of our drams in Melbourne or Sydney or wherever you guys are sitting this evening. So yeah, we're hugely proud of where we are. This little tiny, it's not even a village, it's a hamlet. There's probably 4 houses. And yeah, there's a little old distillery with about, I think there's a slide where we talk about the size of us. We have a capacity of about 370,000 litres of alcohol a year. We're not at capacity at the moment. We're growing it really quickly. We're about 260,000 litres right now. So, you know, the time when we move to full capacity will involve 24-hour shifts, and, you know, a workforce that is scarce and difficult to find at the moment. That's the key driver of not getting or not reaching our production capacity right now. But from that little distillery churning out 370,000 litres a year, you know what, it will position us, you know, we'll never be massive. We will be, you know, amongst some well-known brands, let's say, when we get to the capacity that we're at. And I think that shows on another slide the kind of world we're operating in. We're never going to be massive. We never want to be mainstream, because we want to create this global luxury single malt whiskey brand. And everything that we're trying to do is this modern luxury. So it's all about rarity, design. We are design-led distillery. So everything we do, you know, some of the releases we'll talk about later, they've come from the, you know, they've been reverse engineered. So our whiskey maker will think, right, I want to create a whiskey that ticks X, Y, and Z box from an emotion perspective, or from a, you know, from an experience perspective. So he'll design his whiskies in that way. So absolutely no qualms at all about traditional luxury and the role that those guys play. The video that we have just seen, we were really honored to be part of a project late last year that was run by the British luxury trade body. It's called Walpole. And we were nominated alongside people like Bentley and Joe Malone and various other brands, that really well-established brands, and also some new brands, as, you know, up-and-coming luxury, modern luxury brands that represent all that's, you know, important in the world of craftsmanship or innovation in modern British luxury. And that's where that video came from. So again, just trying to differentiate ourselves a little bit from the heritage. We haven't got the heritage that the guys in Scotland particularly have.
Yeah, wonderful. I'll ask you a few questions about the video in a minute. What can you tell us about this Muscatel wine cask finish?
Yeah, Muscatel wine cask. So Muscatel wine cask, you know, Muscatel is similar to PX from a sherry, but it's less sweet, right? So the grapes are from Cadiz, from the Cadiz province in southern Spain, and they're sun-dried. The soleo process dries the grapes. And so there's, you know, huge amounts of, or hugely reduced amounts of water in those grapes. And then the relative sugar levels are really impacting the grapes, the grapes flavor ultimately. So really floral notes come out. The casks that we used here are American oak casks, so first fill American oak casks. And yeah, I guess from tasting the whiskey, it's 10:30 in the morning here, so I don't have any in front of me. You guys, you know, you lead the way and tell me what you're experiencing here. And we'll come on to explaining this portfolio, particularly our blended portfolio, a little bit later.
So where do you source the whiskey from then? Because it's blended. So you're just looking for grain from elsewhere, I guess, and then.
Absolutely. So our blended whiskey range, the one we source. So if you imagine at the moment we've got in this tasting, we've got two. Have we got two of the blends in front of us today? 4
altogether. So we got sherry, orange, and muscatel.
Right, perfect. Well, this gives us a brilliant platform to explain then. Okay. What we do with our blended whiskies is we buy in grain and malt whiskey in from Islay and Speyside. Okay. So what you will find, you should find a little bit of smoke on all these 4 blended whiskies. Our single malts, on the other hand, are not peated. Okay, so these blended whiskies will have an element of smoke from the proportion of Islay whiskey that we buy in for these. They're then combined with some of our single malt, and they are then matured in exactly the same way as our single malt is matured. So you'll have seen in that video we have a huge focus on a couple of things particularly. We focus a lot on cask and the importance of wood and seasoning on a liquid. And we talk a lot about our active involvement in maturation. So these 4 blended whiskies that we have in front of us today, they all begin their life exactly the same. The liquid is exactly the same at the beginning. And it is only the influence of the casks and the seasoning of the casks that influence the final product. So side by side, if you have the Muscatel, the orange wine, the port and the sherry, you'll see them just from a color perspective, they're all totally different. And that's just the impact of the seasoning of the casks. So as a side-by-side tasting, you should find certain elements of similarity in all of them, but then also, and that's from the bought-in grain and malt whiskey from Islay, but then huge differences because of the casks and the seasoning that's been involved.
Yep. Brilliant. So this one here from me on the nose, like you're talking about dry, maybe more dried fruits. So like more of like a dried dark, like a dates or something like that, like probably not a blonde toffee, but like a dark toffee for me. Maple syrupy. It's quite sweet because of that wine cask influence, I think, on it, which is quite nice. Yeah. I love how fragrant and approachable this one is. It's actually really good to start on because you've kind of got a clean palate, and this I think needs that. It needs a clean palate. It really needs, you're not really nosed anything else. But then I quickly switched on to the orange wine cask finish, which we'll be having next, and it's almost the same. So just before I've drank some of this, I've sort of nosed the both of them, and I quite like. They're quite similar. That nice fruity floral note, but the orange, you can really get that citrusy, zestiness out of that as well. So they're quite vibrant, which are they're really, really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing them first. And both of these products are great summer whiskies. So in a long highball or drinking either of them as they come. For us anyway, up here this time of year, they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, the Muscatel. So anyone else, it's an open forum. Like I say, it's happy to share feedback or comments on the tasting notes as we go.
Sometimes everybody needs to have like 1, 2, or 3 whiskies to start off doing that. So got to drink a few, then they get happier on the keyboard, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody's getting that sort of dryness notes. And I think it's in the same, on the palate of the Muscatel, it's got this I guess this jamminess. I'm not quite sure, whether it's a summer fruits jam or something like that. Which again, that's sweet, nice and sweet, really nice to start off with. But some spice as well, like nutmeg or clove or something. So nice. It's good to start on. Mm.
I mean, I can gladly dish out the official tasting notes and see if that kind of prods anybody or inspires anybody, or is that giving it away too early? But you know what, the process of the drying of these Muscatel grapes, this dryness, it is less sweet, but what comes out is loads of floral notes on the nose anyway. So jasmine is on the tasting notes, honey fruit, and then this smokiness, just a touch of sweet smoke. And then on the palate, yes, citrus, I think was mentioned, and honey, Manuka honey comes out as well. So, again, very, very approachable, very, very easy drinking whiskey for a long summer night or day. Yeah. Is it drinkable? Is it nice? Is it not nice? What's the view?
Anybody want to share?
Yeah, this is Tom in Perth. I enjoyed it, thanks. I say it's 46%, so it's got a little bit of a kick with it. So I'll probably put a dash of water in it myself. But enjoyed it, yeah. Nice, and I'd call it a light whiskey, that one. Very light.
Yeah.
Definitely more smoky on the nose than the orange cask finish, I thought. didn't get the smoke. Quick silly question, maybe. How do you orange? You know, how do you get the orange in the orange cask? I get the muscatel matures in cask. How does the orange work?
Okay, so orange wine. So the orange wine cask, the orange wine itself, is white wine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's orange wine. So,
right.
and what that is, just for anyone that might be interested, it's white wine that's macerated with orange peel after there's an aging process in the Solera system, in the sherry Solera system. So after that aging process, there's white wine that's then macerated with orange peel, and then the grapes are sun dried before they ferment. Before they before fermentation. So that's, it's orange wine. It's not orange peels that have gone in. It's a process to produce wine. And again, that wine is from southern Spain. So again, from Andalusia, from Huelva, a city in southern Spain. And this, is first fill American oak. And again, we can crack on and taste through whiskey and nose it and open the floor to any comments. But interesting, before we move on, these two whiskies are now no longer available. So they were released last year. And the reason why they were released is because our Whisky Maker, because we're obsessed with casks and we source all our casks to our individual specification. So none of our casks are off the shelf. They're all bespoke to us. He was doing the rounds down in Andalusia, visiting our sherry cask supplier, and found, he's always on the hunt for really interesting casks, and found a small number of orange wine casks and Muscatel casks, and then thought, you know what, I'm going to buy these because I can make something quite interesting out of them. So these are all limited releases. And we'll find other interesting casks to make other blended whiskies in going forward. But that's how these originated.
So the one series, will it continue, the blended whiskey series that you've got there? They're just with different casks?
Yeah, so it's evolving as we speak. So these two whiskies, the Muscatel and the orange wine, they've disappeared. They're actually being replaced as we speak by a Manzanilla cask, so the one Manzanilla, and then another port cask called the one Colheita. So what we now have in the range, we've got a standard kind of the one fine blend, which is super versatile. We use it particularly in the on-trade in the UK and other markets as a cocktail base whiskey. And then we have these finishes, these cask finishes. So we'll have the sherry that we'll taste later, the port, and then we'll also have the Manzanilla and the Colheita. So we'll have two different sherries and two different ports that are all very different to each other. So again, just demonstrating the role of seasoning has on the liquid. So orange wine, this aromatized wine, what do we think? What are we getting from it?
I like this one as well. Like, again, saying it's nice and fragrant, it's got a citrusiness to it. I think was it floral, zesty, fresh, really nice. Not like a whiskey I've had before, definitely not. Yeah, very approachable.
And I guess that is part of the reason why we released a whiskey like this, because people are, what's this? They've never had it before. They don't. What is orange wine? What am I to expect? And that's what we're trying to do in a lot of these things is just try to be a touch different and try to bring new stuff to consumers as well. So that's good to hear.
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, definitely is. Very flavoursome, and like for me, I'm like drinking whiskey pretty much every day, trying new whiskies, etc. That 46.6% ABV. I think for it sits really nicely. You don't need to chill filter it at that point. I would imagine it's not chill filtered as a blend. But yeah, all the components go really well together. Yeah,
none of our whiskies are chill filtered. None of them. No artificial color, no caramel, all natural color, non-chill filtering. So if you put up the Moscatel or the orange wine versus the sherry, you can see, you know, the deep red of the sherry versus the far lighter color of the other two whiskies, and the kind of rose pink of the port. That's all the cask. That's not anything that we're doing manually.
Mm. Yeah. So that the new make spirit that you're producing, then what's the new make spirit? What does that taste like? What characteristics are you looking for in them?
Yeah, so the really interesting question. So our new make is, so you heard Davil on the video talking about the artist and the colors. So here's the whiskies, the various casks that he has at his disposal when he comes to blend. And we talk about blending a lot as a distillery, which might be unusual as well. Those are his paint, those are his colors that he's going to put on his canvas, and the new make is the canvas. So what we're trying to get from a new make is something that's, you know, as consistent and easy to work with as possible, that he can then layer those colors or flavors or spices or whatever analogy you want to use onto the top of that new make. So we're not trying to create, you know, we're trying to create a new make that is really able to carry some big old flavors from our casks, you know, and allow the seasoning to do the work. So we're not necessarily looking for, you know, a super complex or you know, even sellable new make. We're not in the market of selling our new make. We don't. It has to be that base, that canvas that we can then layer the colors on top of.
Brilliant.
So you'll get from our new make, it's very creamy. There's some grassy notes on it. We're just trying to get consistency at all points through our new make.
Yeah, brilliant. And if anybody that's on here hasn't done this before, and I really should say this at the start, and just sometimes think, oh, you know, a lot of people have been on these tastings before. What we try to do with whiskey is trying to take a whiskey, really good to use one of these kind of bulb type glasses, so larger bottom than the top, so the aromas sort of filter through. And what you're really looking to do is keeping your mouth open, give the whiskey just a hover over your nose and have a smell, and try to see if you can pick any flavors. If it's too strong in your nose, add some water to it. So it just drops at a time, because you can add 1 drop of water too many to a whiskey and you'll just sort of take away all flavor and all smell. So, but it's about you, it's not about us. I don't need water because I drink whiskey all the time, and I probably need it a little stronger. Whereas might be yourself, you just add a couple of drops of water to it just to bring the ABV down, just to bring that, I guess, that spice in the back of your throat down. A lot of people say it's burn, but in the industry it's called spice. So burn's not a quite an etiquette word to use in the industry. So it's all about spice. And so the next whiskies, you know, have a go at really, you know, nosing the whiskey. And then from that point as well, when you taste, try to keep it in your mouth a little bit, and try to think about what you taste. And then the finish for us is, well, what's still in your mouth after you've swallowed it? I mean, how's it drying? What do you still taste? Is it a long finish? Is it short? Does it disappear quickly? Does it stick around for a while? These two whiskies for me, like, they're not hugely long finished whiskies, but I think on the palate they give you so much flavour that they don't need to be. You know, and from my point of view, I believe that something like this coming out of that distillery, it's a great for me summer or spring whiskey. You know, where and it can be had with ice as well. I think it would really hold up to those components as well.
Absolutely. You know, these are both really versatile whiskies that go great in a highball, really refreshing. So a story about the orange wine cask. I was in Italy a few weeks ago doing a big tasting in person, just like this, but in person with the Whiskey Club Italia. And there were 40, 50 guys in there, and it was a baking hot evening. And we went through this tasting, and then we sat down for dinner. And the chairman of the Italian Whiskey Club, he just started passing around the orange wine cask. You know, these guys were sitting on collections of whiskey that you know, are beyond your wildest dreams. And he said, you know what, this is the kind of whiskey I want to drink, that on a night like this, that's not complicated, it's really accessible. you can have it with friends. You don't really have to think about it. It's, you know, it's not too complex that you're struggling with it. Super accessible, and easy to drink whiskey. So it's exactly what it's for.
Yeah, that's good. Like I think we've tasted a few whiskies over the past few months, and like I think some whiskies are a bit, you know, have it, and it's a lot to think about, and there's massive big flavors in there, and sometimes, I don't know, I get a little bit tired of that. It's nice to get a whiskey that you can sit in the room with friends, and you don't actually need to talk about the whiskey. You just talk about life, and the whiskey's just there, and it's making you feel good, and it's, you know, really flavoursome, and you know, it doesn't always need to be this big, bold, full, complex flavour. You know, it's it's good. We'll move on, I think, to the sherry or the port.
Let's go with the port next.
Yeah,
I'm always a little bit vexed on how we best go about this because these blends have got an element of peat in them. I hope it's not too. I don't think it's too much that it will distract your palate from the unpeated whiskies that are coming up. So I think we're low risk there. But yeah, port I think should be next. And you know, on a side note, you'll have seen it on the video or heard it just now. So we are a sherry-led whiskey distillery. Okay, that's what we are here to do 80-90% of the time. These other orange wines, Muscatel, port casks, red wine casks, whatever else we produce, that just demonstrates our ability to extract some really interesting things from some really interesting casks. But we are a sherry-led whiskey distillery, which is, you know, what we'll come on to later. But this is a port cask blended whiskey, again, made exactly the same way as the previous two whiskies. So grain and malt whiskey from Islay and Speyside that we buy in, and then we add our single malt to it. And this has gone into a first fill tawny port cask. And, you know, tawny port, sweetness, caramel, it's barrel aged. So there's those, you know, aged notes to it. But again, I'll pass over to you guys to kind of have a nose and a taste and maybe a reflection on what you've just tasted versus what this is giving you.
A lot more smoke for me.
Yeah.
Like a peaty, smoky. Yeah.
Excellent.
Certainly, for me, lots of richness. Yeah, but like a red fruit, like summer fruit again. It's got that sort of summer fruit thing, like a cherry or a
absolutely
blueberries or something, you know, in there. Yeah.
Yeah, stone fruit, ripe cherry, all of those red fruits. Yeah.
I like the sort of sweetness of the port cask. It gives a nice sort of roundness to the whiskey, and sort of it gives you a really nice mouthfeel.
Definitely sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't at all how I thought it would taste.
No?
I thought the nose was, it's nice and sweet, and it would just carry on to that sweetness, but there's actually a lot going on in the palate. There's lots of different, like there's actually spice in there as well, which I really didn't get from the nose. So interesting. I didn't expect it to be like warm and spicy. Like I just thought it would just be like a sweet, one-dimensional. Yeah. So Ian said plums, sweet, smoky, surprised by the smoke. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot going on in there, which I like. Like it's kind of puts a buzz on your palate a little bit, and yeah, but even the finish, there's still that cherry element on the finish, and keeps going.
Absolutely.
I don't know what it's like. It's like some sort of cherry sweetie or something like that. You would like a boiled cherry sweet or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots going on. You know, nutmeg, some pepper spice, black pepper spice maybe. But yeah, they're all, again, this is made in exactly the same way with exactly the same original liquid as the previous two whiskies. It's just the cask that is making this difference.
Yeah. Paul said it's like a dark chocolate cherry ripe that you've left too near a bonfire.
Yeah, because there's wood smoke in there as well, for sure. Definitely wood smoke in there.
Coming from Scotland, we're well known for deep frying Mars bars and all that sort of stuff. And one of the best things I ever saw when I came here was somebody had deep fried a cherry ripe. And I thought it was great. Like, yeah, take one of your own sweets and put it in there and get this nice warm cherry center with dark chocolate. It was great.
Yeah, interesting.
Really is.
Do we like it again? Is it all right?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's got a bit more character than the first two.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Still got a little touch of smoke at the end there, which is nice. So enjoy that too.
That's where the smoke's good. It's not overpowering. I'm not a peated whiskey drinker by any means, but it's just adding to have a nice balance.
Yeah, I actually don't drink peated whiskey all that much either.
Yeah.
So having a bit of light peat is really good. The heavy peat has to be 1 a.m. in the morning, and I have to have drunk whiskey for at least 3 hours.
Yep.
And it's what makes you regret it the next day.
Yeah, I always regret it the next day. Not that much though.
Yeah, Ian said it's really nice. Favourite so far. I actually expected it to like it the least out of everything, which was interesting because you think of port whiskey sometimes and you think, yeah, it's a bit one-dimensional. Nobody's really doing it fabulously, and then this comes along and you think, oh, it's done well.
Well, I'm going to remind you. I'll mention that phrase one-dimensional or multi-dimensional later on, because it's a huge thing that we talk about in our whiskies, particularly our single malts. So we'll just capture that thought for now. Yeah, I mean, port whiskies, bit Marmite, you either love them or hate them or whatever. We're trying to add that complexity. We're trying to add something that's just a little bit different.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. On to the sherry.
Onto the sherry. So we're a sherry-led whiskey distillery. This is the one sherry cask finished. So this is, very traditional, I guess, from a sherry sense. So Oloroso and PX. It's deep and intense as a whiskey, so very different to the Moscatel and the orange wine at the beginning. And you can see that from the color, even looking side by side. This whiskey is an award-winning whiskey. So last year won the best blended whiskey in the World Whisky category. So yeah, beautiful color. Paul's just said it's all natural color, all from the cask. So that deep red color. Again, very different to the previous three whiskies to look at, if not to smell and to taste.
I do love the sherry explosion out of the glass when you get your nose into it. I love a sherry whiskey. It's just lovely.
It's the best one so far for me, and it's straight across the tongue. And when I put it between me front of my mouth and my tongue, it gets nice and viscousy straight away and gives me all the flavors. It's nice. I like this one.
I agree. It feels quite viscous, doesn't it, when you get it in the mouth? Yeah, maybe not quite syrupy, but definitely more viscous than the other three.
Yeah, definitely.
And the peat's not quite so obvious either in this one.
Not at all. No.
Which I like.
Why would that be then, Andy? Why is this one a bit more viscous then? The sherry, is it being delivered to you with sherry still in the barrel, or is it?
No. So all the sherry's disgorged. It's a great question and not one I've had before. I don't know why you would be experiencing that increased viscosity. Our whiskies, and particularly you'll find that in our single malts when we come onto them shortly, there is an inherent creaminess in there. And that's, a mixture of the new make, it's predominantly from the new make that we use. We want to create quite a creamy new make, and you know, that might just come through on the sherried whiskies more than on the others, but I don't know the real reason why you're finding that.
Are these still available to buy today, or are they sold out?
Yeah, so the port and the sherry are still available, and like I said before, they'll sit alongside a Manzanilla cask, which is totally different to this one. It's super saline, you know, very fresh, really quite, again, a summery, beautiful summery whiskey. So you've got this winter's night, or European winter's night, sitting by the Christmas tree with the fire on. That's this whiskey. Then you've got a totally different kind of sherry that we're sitting alongside it. And then the two port, the Collator port and the port are available as well.
Good.
Good.
I'll be picking one up in August when I'm over there.
Where are you going to?
I used to live in Wigton, only about 16 miles away. So I'm going home for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Oh, get yourself to the distillery. Let me know when you go in. I'll come and say hi.
I'll be there. I was there 3 years ago, and I picked up a #1 when they first came out. And
oh, did you?
Yeah, I'm still sitting on it. It's worth some money now, thank goodness. But I did drink a few while I was there as well. So, and I got the full 5, so I'm well set up.
Good lad, excellent. So from this, the one sherry, then, what are we getting on the nose or on the palate or whatever you want?
It's just full. It's a full flavored whiskey. It's got everything, I think. It's good.
Jason, I think more about like a pickled or pickled ginger or something like that on the nose. Well, with that sort of Christmas cake element to it, like raisins or sultana element to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some people get dates, like Majdoul dates.
Yeah.
Bit of polished wood on the nose. But yeah, it's that you know, Christmas cake, those raisins, sultanas, all of that. Ginger.
On the palate for me is like this sweetness that's married with like charred wood. So the two come together really well. That's all I get. That's really smoky charred wood, and then sweetness, and then smoky charred wood and sweetness, and it just really, really combines well together. And I think that's why it gives you that really long finish, because those two flavors just can keep combining. But quite vanilla-y as well, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
So again,
like, is there only 4 in the blended whiskey series then usually, or how many do you have?
Yeah. There's these 4, and there's like I said before, there's another one which is let me get this the right way around. It's the child of all of these, so it's a combination of everything, and it's super versatile. So that's kind of our entry level blend, called the One Farm Blend, and it's just got a bit of everything going on in it. But it's super versatile. So there's that, and then the 4 that I've mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. You said, I think in an email to me, you said that when you started at the distillery, it was the week when I think you went into lockdown.
Yeah, I started. So I before I worked here, I worked for Diageo, and then came straight from Treasury Wine Estates, big Aussie business, working on Penfolds amongst other things. And then I joined these guys, 16th of March 2020, and I think we went into lockdown on the 23rd or something like that. And in my first week, I'd literally been grounded, so couldn't travel anywhere. I'd taken an involuntary 20% pay cut, and I was looking around thinking, have I made the right move here? It was all a bit nuts. So yeah, that was my first couple of weeks. It was unbelievably weird.
Yeah. And it was quite funny when I first spoke to you. like, and it was the same in my position, as that like you were sort of working as well as looking after kids and all that sort of thing. So it was good that you found something quite close to home, you know, like it's, yeah, so being a good move. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've not looked back. It's got better. It's got better since week one, that's for sure.
That's good. I'm going to put this presentation back on in case there's anything else you want to cover before we hit single malts.
Yeah, let's do that.
And because we still do have 3 whiskies to go through. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
Quick look.
Yeah, so slide 8 is quite interesting if we want to jump to that. Yeah, so this is what we were talking about. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one's great. So we're never going to be massive. We're not, because I mentioned before, we've got a capacity of 370,000 litres of year, something like that, which ultimately will allow us to grow to the same size or a similar size to people like Bruichladdich and Glendronach, right? So we're not ever going to be hugely ubiquitous everywhere. So the way that we're going about it is to, to create that really quite rare element to what we're doing. So it's all about craftsmanship. It's all about being really authentic. We're trying to, push the boundaries in what we do in terms of the way that we market our whiskies, and we'll come on to that shortly in some of the releases that we've released so far. Because ultimately, again, we're in an industry that is steeped in history and steeped in authenticity. And we can't, we can't recreate, we can't just go and find 200, 300 years and put it in our back pocket. So we've got to find other ways of creating our own little niche. So this is what we're doing. So we are going to be small and rare. And this, sorry, no, you can flick on to the next part for sure, because we look at some of our price points, right? So the blended whiskies that we just looked at or just tasted, they're pushing £50 on shelf for a blended whiskey. So as a consumer on a shelf, looking at the range of blended whiskies that are available up to, or single malts that are available to purchase, people will often think, wow, they're a bit expensive actually. But it's only when we get into the whys and the wherefores and the tasting of them that actually, I hope you found that the blended whiskies we've just tasted are night and day versus whatever, a Johnny Red or even a Johnny Black or something like that. The preconception or the misconception that blended whiskey is this inferior product isn't true if they're made in a really careful and interesting way. This art of whiskey making is also enabling us to create our own pathway, and we focus on a few things that other distilleries might not, and there's nothing wrong with focusing on your water as a story, or your barley or where it's from as your unique selling point, but we don't do that. Yeah, we've got a river next to our distillery that the water's drawn from. Yeah, we use barley, could be from England, could be from Scotland, wherever we choose our barley from, wherever we get the most consistent high quality product. So it's not from, this local field round the corner because it's, local terroir is important to us. Yeah, we've got a sense of place of where we're from, but actually it's not the key focus of what we do. We focus on a couple of things. One is we look at whiskey being, or the production of whiskey as a continuum. So what that means is, as a distillery, we've got a whiskey making team of about 15 or 16 people, which is actually quite a lot for a business of our size. And that team are responsible for the whole process, from cask selection all the way through to blending and everything in between. So what we don't have is, we don't have, you know, a master distiller and then a master blender, and they work in silos. We've got one team and one whiskey maker who control the whole process, because what happens is, when you change something at one point, it'll affect something at a later date. So it's a continuum. So everything you do in that process has a knock-on effect later on. So that holistic whiskey making journey, we call it, is one thing. The second thing we talk about, and I've talked about it a few times, are casks. The whole, you know, the whole world can buy a bourbon cask for £150 from the internet, right? We can. We don't do that. So we do use bourbon casks, we do use red wine casks, we use orange wine casks, but over 70%, probably 80% of our casks are made down in Andalusia with our partner, who make our casks to our specification. So from size, type of oak, so whether it's French, Spanish, a certain variant of Spanish or French oak that we'll come on to in a whiskey in a minute, everything is made to our specification, because, again, reverse engineering a whiskey, if our whiskey maker thinks, right, I want to create a whiskey that invokes emotions that I had in my childhood, or I want to create a whiskey that delivers this kind of experience to the consumer, I need to use this cask with this wood, with this seasoning, and then he works backwards from there. So hugely hands-on, hugely exacting requirements that we have for our casks. So we spend thousands of pounds on casks, which fortunately we took that decision that, you know, it's costly to go and buy off, you know, a bespoke sherry cask. You know, they might cost anything between £1,000 and £6,000 versus a much cheaper bourbon cask. So as a new distillery, lots of new distilleries just can't afford to do that. And it's where the vast majority of our investment, we're an independent business that's gone out to the investment community and found some backers. Most of our investment goes on to our into our whiskey making and cask lay down strategy. So casks are hugely important. And also what we've hopefully seen in these blended whiskies, the casks that we use for our blended whiskies are the same casks that we use for our single malt. So if you get a great cask, you need a great whiskey team to get the most out of that and to make the whiskey as good as it can be to play nicely with that cask. But without a great cask, you know, if it's a sherry cask that you don't know where it's been or how long it's been in use for, you might not get the result that you want. We know exactly how many times our sherry casks have been used. Most of them at the age that we are as a business are first fill sherry casks. We're just starting to move on to second fill, probably in the next year or two. We know exactly where they've been and what they're capable of. The second thing we talk about a lot is the time that we take. So from fermentation and distillation, that process is about 96 hours. So things like making a stew, right? So our Davil, our whiskey maker, talks a lot about food and art, but draws in experiences and analogies from all over the place. It's like when you're slow cooking a ragu or a stew or something. The longer you get those components working together, the more depth of flavor that you get. So we take our time in the distillation and fermentation phase. So, you know, 96 hours. When we're reducing the new make spirit down, we only add 7 liters of water per minute, unlike other distilleries that might chuck 60 liters in all at once. We're trying not to shock the spirit. We're trying to make sure that no one's coming in your bed in the morning and chucking a bucket of cold water over your head to wake you up. It's, you know, that would shock you. same way that that would shock the new make spirit. So again, we take our time and we make sure that we're just trying to add flavor at every part of the process. And then the third part we talk a lot about is the art of blending. You saw the video in Davil's lab, whiskey making lab. I mean, it's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory in there, right? Hugely scientific. So this combination of art and science and nature. So nature plays its part by putting the new make spirit in a cask and leaving that to do its job. But actually, by using some scientific approach and some artistry as well, we can extract even more and help nature to bring even more complexity and character. So the way that we do that in blending, a key thing we do in the maturation phase is this élevage process that Davil talked about on the video. The élevage process comes from cognac. What it means is, typically you would fill a cask with new make spirit and then leave it in your warehouse for 10 years or 15 or 20 or however long you think. And then the whiskey comes out at the end. And you know what? That's been happening for hundreds of years. What we do and what the guys in cognac do is they sample each cask 2 or 3 times every year to see and to understand and to build a picture of what that liquid is doing in that cask. And at any point, if that liquid is not doing what Davil and the team expect it to do at that point in its journey, they'll make a change. So it might think, right, the whiskey in that cask, it's too one-dimensional, it's too sherry heavy, whatever. We need to add some vanilla, we need to add some bananas, whatever. They'll move that liquid into an ex-bourbon cask with American oak, for example. Or they might look at the sherry, they might taste the liquid and it's the cask's too aggressive. So it might be too hot in the warehouse, so they'll move it somewhere cold, or they'll shift it into a cask. So the liquid is going on a journey. So all our liquid is being blended between various casks through its maturation journey. And that's before we even get into Davil's lab. And you can see the picture at the bottom. He has all his cask samples in front of him, and they're like the artist's palette, where he has, you know, 5 different shades of blue because he needs to get a certain depth of color to make the sky exactly the color it needs to be, or the sea, or whatever it is. And that's exactly what we do at the end when we're bringing these whiskies together. We are not leaving anything to chance because we know what the whiskey's, what stage it's at and whether it's ready. We don't just put our finger in the air and hope and, right, it's 10 years, clock's ticked, finished, we're done. So therefore, at that point, we've got a really clear picture of what the whiskey is doing in that cask, and then we can blend it and make it as multi-dimensional as Davil wants it to be in the blending lab. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to beat nature or help nature or help the distilleries that have got hundreds of years of experience and age on their side to make whiskies like the Whisky Maker Reserve number 4 to become the best, you know, judge the best single malt whiskey in the world 2022 against all manner of other whiskies from around the world, from Scotland, Taiwan, you name it, at a really relatively young age. So those are 3 things that really are a key focus of what we do. Sorry, I whittled on then for a while. So
No,
any questions on that?
What's the it's great. It's it was a, yeah, like a really really good story behind what's happening there. And they've obviously, we were just talking to somebody the other day about talking about Lakes Distillery in Tasmania here, and we're saying, you know, like it's always about you know, teams, etc. But I think you always got to remember is that the guy who's the master distiller or the master blender, he kind of brings all the team together, because, you know, he's the one barking the instructions, and he's the one that's saying, you know, this is what I need, this is how I need it, and the other guys do the job if you do it perfect enough, then he's going to get what he wants, and then he can create what he needs to create. You know, so it's a huge job for him. You know, to keep his team together, to keep them like doing the right things all the time, and yeah, just the distillery evolving that way.
Absolutely. So all our distillery is automated, by the way. So it's this hugely traditional building, but it's a super modern distillery inside. So it's all automated. Yeah, we've got human intervention and manual stuff happening, but actually our new make, you know, the team know it's all automated. The new make just flows through. We're getting this consistency that then we can then take to Davil, and he does his magic, works his magic in the blending lab. He's quite the artist and scientist.
Which single malt we're going to start with then? You've made us all thirsty now.
Okay, right.
We've got
Boughey,
yeah. Balmasque, or the number 5 Whisky Maker's Reserve.
So we'll leave the Whisky Maker Reserve until the end. Yep. How about we start with Mosaic? We start with Mosaic. And then if you flick onto the next slide, and then I can just give a bit of context if you can, Craig. Yeah, thank you.
So from everybody's point of view, we're starting on single malt now. We've been drinking blends. We're now drinking single malt from the distillery.
Yeah, so we've got two, just really briefly, there are two elements to our single malt. So the first pillar or element is our Whisky Maker's Reserve, and that's what we'll go on to taste at the end. The Whisky Maker's Reserve is always sherry led. It's always sherry. Each release is sherry. So we'll come on to that later. If you flick to the next slide, just to give me some, help me give some context, please. The second pillar that we have are called the Whisky Maker's Editions. And you can see here, the Whisky Maker's Editions. These are all limited releases, and these are all born from or to demonstrate a couple of things. One is our ability, or our Whisky Maker's ability, to use casks and seasoning in a really interesting way. So all these whiskies might not be sherry. They might be red wine casks like Sequoia. They might be, you know, a port cask like Miramar, for example. But again, if you look at the labels on them, you can see what we're trying to do here is evoke emotions or feelings or memories through whiskies, okay? So if you've only just been introduced to the Lakes single malt, I would encourage you to think about the Whisky Maker's Reserve at the end as the kind of anchor point. These additions that we're going to taste first are diversions away from that anchor point. But there's a story behind each of these whiskies, and we're going to start with Mosaic, and it's the bottle you see on the right-hand side there. And I don't know if the screen is big enough for you to see the image, but the image on the front of that bottle of Mosaic, it's 46.6% ABV. But the image on the front of Mosaic is of the Middle East, basically. It's about the Middle East. It's got guys there on the Silk Road. That's the story about it. It's about East meeting West, okay? So our whiskey maker, Davil, is from Northern India. He grew up in India, went to school in the US, started his career in finance in the US, didn't like it, wanted to change, wanted to work in whiskey, came to Scotland and worked for the Heineken Group as a brewmaster, and then went to the Macallan. So it's this journey from East connecting West. And that's what he's trying to capture in this whiskey Mosaic. So the idea of the bazaars in the Middle East or in Turkey, and some of the other elements as you move from West to East should be captured in this whiskey. So what we're trying to do here is not be fixated on what casks they are. This is sherry, obviously, but we're not using that as our kind of oh, this, you know, this is a sherry cask, this is however many years old, this is this is that. It's a more story-led approach to these. So Mosaic, with that very vague, intentionally vague explanation of what the liquid is, what's anyone getting from Mosaic?
I'm sort of, I've got this sort of tagine thing happening in my my mouth at the moment. I've got this, you know, like a tagine with prunes and, you know, that sort of stuff in it, and those wonderful sort of Middle Eastern spices. But I'm just finding the length extraordinary. The length is amazing on this one. It just goes on forever, and the nose is really curious. You know, I said to, you know, a friend who's doing this as well. It's, you know, it's funny. It sort of reminds me a little bit of the Mizunara cask. It's got that just unique character that you don't see all that often.
Yeah.
It's really
Nice
smooth.
one.
It's really smooth too. It just goes down easily.
It's a big step. It's a big step up from your blended 4.
Yeah. It's got this beautiful cayenne pepper nose to it as well. Yeah.
It's marked on the pack as being 54%. Would that be correct? Because it feels like it tastes like it's 54%.
No, this is, it's 46.6 Mosaic.
Yeah.
The Bal Mask, if that's how you pronounce it, is 54%. So.
Okay, so I've no wonder I wasn't getting the same. Opened the wrong one. Okay.
I'm going to actually join you now for tasting. It's past 11 o'clock, so I'm just going to get myself a couple of bottles and glasses. I'm just over there, but talk amongst yourself. I'll be back.
Just to let everybody know, obviously we were about 15 to 20 minutes late starting, so we're probably going to run round to about 9:45, 10:45. So if you do have to go, obviously this has been recorded. I do apologise, it's been over, but we do have this whiskey plus another 2 to go, and then some questions if you've got any questions. But yeah, should sort of go for another maybe 15 to 20 minutes.
So Craig, quick question. When are we, and I know you mentioned this earlier, when are we likely to see these whiskies available in Australia?
We are pushing the man that's given us the presentation to try and get them here as quickly as possible now. It's just been difficult to secure when they make them. So yeah, we're waiting on his decision on when they can be available here. We certainly, we've been talking to a couple of other distilleries as well that we're bringing in, and we're getting concerned that they're taking too long from when they first start a release to get them here, because what happens is they get here through auction sites, and then people start selling them through auction sites, and then it puts the price of them up, and then eventually people get turned off by it because they're like, oh, they're too expensive, and sort of get put on a back burner. So we do need them here sooner rather than later, so we can get them in this price market, you know, and start talking about them. So
yeah, so, sorry about that. I heard the question. Yeah, you know what, Australia is a really important market for us to get into. We've done a lot of work. We've done a lot of work internally in terms of, you know, everything we're trying to do is consumer led. So we've made some pretty big decisions in terms of where we don't want to be and what kind of markets we don't want to be in. But fortunately, Australia is one of them that we do want to be in terms of, you know, all kinds of analysis in terms of our consumer base and where would work for us. So yeah, to Craig's point, I'm really interested in exploring how we can get these things over really quickly. Fun fact: historically, we before my time, we tried to launch, or we did actually send some product to Australia years ago. It wasn't whiskey; it was like liqueurs and gins and stuff into a couple of the airports. But yeah, that's that's a long time ago. So yeah, really open for getting these down to you soon.
And
Yeah,
what we'll
so-
do is when we find out, when they're coming in, etc., we have a list of everybody that's been on this tasting. So whatever we get ourselves, we'll certainly put it out to you guys first before anyone else, because you have been on the tasting and you've explored the range. So we'll come to you first and say, oh, we have managed to get some here, and this is what's available. So
yeah, and this, these editions that you see in front of you here, and we'll talk about another in a moment, Balmask, these are all limited editions. What they're not, these whiskies are not everywhere. So a couple of these whiskies were just customer exclusives in the UK. So Le Goûter was 350 bottles, the one on the left. That was in Harvey Nichols, sold out in about 3 hours, £100 on shelf. We had one called Miramar that was exclusive on Master of Malt. Again, there was a slightly bigger release, but sold out in 48 minutes or something ridiculous. What we're trying to do here moving forward, we will have some releases that are going to be just international available releases and not available in the UK, and then vice versa, because no market wants a dozen different releases in any calendar year particularly. The collectors hate it, but yeah, it's the way we're going. So yeah, definitely watch out for some interesting stuff coming to Australia. Yeah, great question, Ian. Yeah, in good time. So, I'm just about to release, a whiskey that's only going to be available in Japan, for example. Japan's our second biggest market outside the UK. So yeah, in time, that's exactly what's going to happen, is when a market gets to a certain size or relevance to us, then yeah, we'll do individual bottlings for these editions for a certain market. And this is the way that as well, we get asked a lot, do you do single casks? No, we don't, because of the journey that the whiskey goes on through the casks. But these are like our single casks that we will release by market, specifically by market. So Mosaic, just to finish off, any other feedback on Mosaic? So all those things, cardamom, these Middle Eastern spices, this balance between the autumn in the west and then moving through to the east, to the Orient, through the Spice Road, and then the sandalwood and the Oriental spices as well.
I still feel it's quite floral, particularly on the finish. Yeah. Like you're saying, like cardamom, it feels like it's more that cardamom root, like you're pulling out of the garden, and it's still, it's quite powerful but well integrated. So that's yeah.
Yeah, and you cut. I don't think you can see the image really clearly on there, but if I hold that up there, you can see that image there of just this Oriental kind of vibe that's going on. And that's what we're trying to capture in the liquid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should we move on to Balmask? Okay. Really interesting whiskey. I'll let you nose it, and then we can taste it together, and I'll talk you through what makes this a little bit different. So the image on the front of Balmask is this image here. You can see it on the screen. So the image is quite complex. So you have a picture of what I see is a lady wearing a mask, and then the next thing I see is a car on a road with the headlights on, and then the next thing I see is a man standing behind the woman. And there's all sorts going on from this image that just appear the more you look at it. There's a tree somewhere. Is she driving on? Are they driving along a cliff? I don't know. But lots going on that image. So if you think about that, when we start to engage with the whiskey. On the nose, bit of orchard fruit, some spice, but not hugely spicy. There's some.
I'm getting almonds and like roasted almonds and incense.
Yeah.
I'm getting a bit of treacle on the nose.
So, has that French oak? I'm getting a real sort of French oak character.
Nice. Yeah, we'll come on to that.
I love French oak. There's something about French oak.
Well, you'll love this whiskey then. Okay.
That's the nose sort of surprised me when I first tried it. I thought, well, that's a bit odd, but the palate is just extraordinary. Mind you, I do like a high alcohol whiskey.
Yeah, so 54%, and bearing in mind, the previous whiskies have all been 46.6. We don't bottle any whiskies under 46.6%. Most of our single malts, until recently, have been over 50%. So, and this isn't for commercial reasons, right? So whatever we bottle the whiskey at is because the whiskey making team think it's better or best at that ABV. So, you know, they will try it at a variety of ABVs and then stick to whatever they think's best. So this is 54% Balmask. French oak comment there. That's, yeah, definitely something I'll talk about in a minute. Anyone else?
It's still got the, like I said, it's still got the creamy element to the finish of it as well. It's still got this floral element to it, which is great. But spot on in the French oak stuff. It's like particularly that first aroma you get when you approach the glass. It's just beautiful. It's like,
yeah, it's lovely.
Beautiful wood. Yeah.
So does anybody on the palate? For me, it starts off quite sweet and quite, you know, nice and approachable. And then at the back of my palate, then there's all this spice starts coming out. Yeah. So it's like, you know, two very different experiences that I'm getting in my palate. And there's a good reason for that. So the French oak piece, this is, you know, purposely being made to demonstrate the complexity of French oak, and not just one French oak, but two. So there are two different French oaks that we've used in this whiskey. One is Quercus petraea, and the other one is Quercus robur. Now, Quercus petraea, so there are 5 or 6 forests where you get French oak from in France. Quercus petraea is only found in one of them, and that's in Limousin in France. And it's the finer of the two. It's got a tighter grain, and it's got really firm but silky tannins, right? So French oak is notoriously difficult to work with. It's quite demanding and quite unforgiving. And the Whisky Maker Davil, what he's tried to do is showcase how both these different French oak types, robur and petraea, play with each other in the glass. So the robur is less elegant, it's fuller body, it's more tannins, but it's less complex. So the first part on your palate will be the influence of one of them. Sorry, there's someone on the floor.
Oops, lost him.
What do you say? Somebody's at the door. Yeah, that was really nice.
That'll be his new TV.
Somebody's heard about the whiskey taste and they want to drop a drop.
Sorry, no,
maybe
it's nothing. It's nothing that spectacular, I'm afraid. Sorry.
What?
Okay.
I think
Belmas. And
Paul
the
had
postman's alive. My dog's not killed it.
Uber Eats.
So Belmask, what else are we getting? What are we getting this versus Mosaic, for example?
I get raspberry in the flavour, but certainly that wood element is, you know, defining the whiskey. You know.
For me, it's very much like you said. It changes character over time in your mouth and between the front palate and the back palate. And the length is really, really nice. I think I don't take this personally anyway, but I think I actually prefer the Mosaic and found it easier to drink. But that's just me.
Yeah, and that's absolutely valid. You know, I did a tasting not long ago with Balmask and Sequoia, which you see on the screen, which is a red wine cask, totally different. Yeah, you had two trains of thought. You had some people who loved the kind of complexity of this whiskey and the not difficulty, but yeah, there's lots going on with this whiskey. And then the Sequoia was very different. But as you know, for my first dram of the day, it's going down really well.
It's a pretty nice way to start.
Yeah,
starting off on 54%, huh?
Yes.
Wait till 11 o'clock. I don't drink my cask strength till after 11.
What, you just put the blended in your porridge in the morning?
But yeah, incense, toasted almonds, some spice, some raisins, there's loads going on in this.
Yeah.
I think probably the complexity would bring me back to it after the Mosaic, just because there's so much happening. And I love complexity. It's exactly the same measure in a red or a white wine. The complexity is what keeps you interested in the wine and keeps you coming back to it.
Yeah. Paul has said bolder, more spice than Mosaic. Yeah. Subtle. Like raspberry's a good call. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. Yeah, it's a great whiskey to just sort of play around with in the palate. Really, really nice. Yeah. Lots of nice aromas to it. Yeah, and I love the colour of these two as well. You get such a nice colour to them in the glass. Really inviting.
Yeah, and the the image as well. And again, it's this. Things just keep springing out at you. So every time you drink it, you'll find something else, and there's something else that creeps up on you. And it might not be hugely evident, but it's just subtle. There's little subtleties that just keep popping out here and there. Yeah, and it's this fight between the two different French oak casks. Interesting. You talked about, it's a whiskey that you think you'd come back and have another go at. One of the things that I noted down before was, it was from the tasting notes or the back of the bottle, it's mystery, seduction, always promising more. There's always, you're expecting or wanting more from it. So exactly that.
Yeah, the whiskies that I keep on going back to over and over are the ones that have that depth of complexity to them, that give you, they almost change with your mood a little bit. And you always find new things in them over time. So
yeah. And you know what? We said it before. We started distilling in 2014. So none of these whiskies are old. None, age is just a number. We have this, all these are no age statement whiskies. Moving forward, you know what? Yeah, we will probably hold back a percentage of our whiskies to become aged whiskies, but it might be 15 or 20%, because the way that we do things and our approach to whiskey making, we're already getting great results from what we're doing now. So we're quite clear that a no age statement route forward is what we're going to continue to do. So yeah, so don't let anyone tell you that a young whiskey from England is not better than a 15-year-old from wherever else. It's just one dimension.
It's certainly something that's quite interesting just now, being in the retail side of things with whiskey and wholesale, is that when an age statement whiskey comes available, it's snapped up pretty quickly now. And it's amazing how people have it embedded that the age statement whiskey will be better than something with a no age statement. You know, I think right across the sort of consumer right around the world would think that's the case, but we're starting to find now that it's not the case anymore. It's it's the way the whiskey's been looked after, and it's the way it's been blended, and so it's but you see a lot of people picking up age statements now. We couldn't put on now like something like a 30-year-old like Aaron, or a 20-year-old Aaron, or a 30-year-old Macallan or something like that. As soon as it's put up for sale, it just sells. It doesn't matter the price of it, because people seem to be, oh, we must be running out of it. We must be running out of age statement. And it's like, oh, sometimes I don't know if it matters.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Are we happy to move on to the Whisky Maker's Reserve? And we can flick to the previous slide, Craig, if you wouldn't mind. And by the way, I'm happy for you to circulate this presentation to all the participants, Craig, if that would help. Sure. Yeah, I can do that. That'd be great. Yeah. We have we record this and then we put it on our YouTube channel, so they should be able to come to there. But probably going through it, watching the video again, they can do it at their own time. I'll probably send the presentation as well. That's great. Thanks for that. No problem. I didn't realise my dog and the postman would be on the internet, but that's fine. That's right. Yeah. There was that number one bottle. Who had the number one bottle? Yeah, there it is. The number one. It was the gentleman from Wigton had the Whisky Maker's Reserve number one. Yep,
that's correct. Like I said, I visited your place 3 years ago, or it might be 4 years ago, and when it came out, and we just went past the entrance, and there was a whiskey opening there, and we went in and tried the number one. Tasted great. So I said to Michael, I was collecting Macallan at the time, I think we should buy one. And do you believe there was one sold for £1,800? There was the only one bottle. It was in Whisky Auctioneer, or one of the Scottish ones. But now they're averaging £500 or £600 in like Whisky Hammer or Whisky Auctioneer. Yeah, making a fortune.
Get it sold.
Yeah. No, I'm hanging on to it.
Yeah. You know, brilliant story. Yeah, that was 2019. So our first single malt Whisky Maker Reserve was released in 2019. Yeah. In the meantime, yeah, absolutely. In the meantime, each release. So we're currently on Whisky Maker Reserve number 5, which unfortunately is also now out of stock. It's all been allocated to various markets around the world. It was released in April this year. The good news is our releases are growing now quite dramatically. So our next Whisky Maker Reserve number 6 and some other great single malt editions that are coming out will definitely have homes for them with you guys. I can see it. But this Whisky Maker's Reserve is absolutely the anchor point, or our house style, our halo product. And it's always sherry. So whether it's Whisky Maker Reserve number 1 or Whisky Maker Reserve number 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're always sherry, but they're always different because the cask makeup might be slightly different. So it might be, predominantly, I don't know, PX one year and Oloroso the next, but it's typically a combination of all of them. Made in exactly the same place, in exactly the same way as all the whiskies that we have tasted through today. This range should have a common thread through it every single release. So there should be a real DNA of the Lakes Distillery from number 1 through to number 5. But because the casks will be slightly different each release, there will be differences in the finish, in the final product from a taste perspective, but there'll always be a red thread going through each of these. So typically, again, you know, all the typical sherried whiskey characteristics that you can imagine.
Again, it's got a hell of a punch, or spice as you call it, but to me, it's a good punch, and very aftertaste. It continues. Very nice.
There's a lot of the dried fruits on the nose, but you'd expect that to come out of a sherry cask whiskey. I don't like figs particularly, not to eat, but I'm getting dried figs.
Yeah.
On the nose.
So if we want to talk more about cask breakdown, this is Oloroso PX, but also red wine casks, and it's Spanish and American oak.
Do you know where the red wine's from?
Do I know where the red wine casks are from? No, I don't think. I don't know. I don't know. I imagine they're from France. I imagine.
Got a lot of vanilla in there too.
Yeah. There should be some vanilla. There should be some creaminess on the palate as well.
The creaminess is sensational, particularly with a sherry cask like that. It's really well done. Creamy toffee type nose.
Yeah, like a brown sugar, toffee. Yeah.
It's funny that the palate on it is a real build up of dark fruits and that caramel element and like dark chocolate, but it's got spice in it. Oh, I just feel like it's not sherry overpowering. The sherry on it's really balanced out with the spirit. I think that's nice. You know, it's again, I don't think it's something you need to think about much, but it's really good.
And again, you know, there is so we do it a lot. We do it a lot at the distillery when, you know, if you come and see us, people are fixated on our single cask, and we actually sample in our whiskey tour a single cask, you know, a dram from a single cask, and we sample it side by side with Whisky Maker's Reserve, and what it shows is this one-dimensional sherry cask whiskey, which is great, versus this layering and this complexity. So yeah, it's a sherried whiskey, but exactly what you said, Craig. There's loads of other stuff going onto it. There's loads of other things that are just adding to that complexity and adding to that layering of flavor.
Sorry, is anybody getting a bit of sort of espresso at the very tail end of the finish?
Absolutely, coffee.
It's
Sure.
just beautiful. It's a really lovely whiskey, Andy. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We're proud of it. And this isn't the one that won the award, by the way. That was number 4.
Oh, I sort of figured you're just teasing us rotten, but anyway.
Yeah, where's it at? I thought it was being the sample.
Was this one released though? Is this next year's winner?
Yeah, well, do you know what? It could be. Yeah, we might well submit it again. But on that note, we were hugely proud to win that award, and it was wholly unexpected. You know, our marketing director happened to be in London on the day of the awards, and we knew we'd won with the best English single malt, just the same as all the other country or regional winners in Scotland had gone through to the final. And she took a punt and said, "Oh, I'm just going to go along and see. You know, it's a whiskey with the Whiskey magazine. We don't spend loads of money with them, and you know, from a commercial perspective, it wouldn't make any sense for us to win the award because, you know, we're not particularly furnishing them with loads of support or money or whatever. And she was on the table with a bunch of guys from Macallan and, you know, just chatting away with a few guys and, you know, we're here for a good night, whatever. And then we won. So she was quite embarrassed or quite taken aback that, one, she didn't even get a little nod the week before that, you know, get the team down or whatever. And yeah, the award was presented, and here we are. And the phone's been running red hot since then, but it just confirms to us that we're on the right track, and that, you know, the things that we're doing are the right things, and they're taking us in the right direction. You know, these are not designed to be whiskies that are in every retailer, in every bar, and every pub on every street corner. It's not what they're there to do. You know, these are whiskies that are serious whiskies, and we're really proud of them. And they'll, you know, we find them in the top bars in the UK, in London, top hotels and restaurants, and again across the world as well. So yeah, hopefully you can find them down your way soon.
Did you say when you're going to release the number 6?
Yeah, so the Whisky Maker's Reserve is always a spring launch. So number 6 will be coming in March, April time. The editions that we just talked about, they come at various points throughout the year. So we'll have a couple coming this side of Christmas, and then we'll have a number in the first half of next year.
Really good.
Yeah. Anything else on so if we think about the single malts that we've tasted through today, any overriding comments or any, you know, favorites or anything else?
I've been really impressed with the whiskies you guys are making, the single malts. They're just, all 3 of them were delicious, and I'd be more than happy to have a bottle of each of them sitting in the cupboard for me to enjoy. So very well done. Just seriously impressive. I'd never even heard of you until I saw you win the award for that.
Really?
For the Whisky Maker number 5.
Yeah, really lovely. Look forward to visiting the distillery one day.
Yeah, thanks very much. Very entertaining, and I'm really pleased my brother's going to be driving me to your distillery, so I don't have to worry about driving home, because I think I'll make a mess of myself.
Well, seriously, you're all really welcome. You know, you're all really welcome to you know, I know it's not exactly around the corner, but you know, you'd have a warm welcome, and yeah, you know, or in the meantime, just you know, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help however I can to give you any more insight or whatever you need about the lakes, because yeah, we're 10 years old. The startup phase has kind of been and gone, and we're now at this kind of really interesting phase where our business is growing quite fast, and you know, we need to continue to drive our awareness. You know, comments like, I never heard about you until you won an award, isn't a surprise to me at all, because we're right at the start of this journey. But I'm really excited about where we've come from, and also what more's to come, because if we're doing this so early on in our journey, then it's safe to say I think we're strapped in for some of the good stuff coming our way.
Yeah, really good.
Definitely doing a great job. Yeah, and like for me again, it was surprising. Hadn't really heard of the distillery. Had heard little bits of it, little bits of story, but hadn't heard how well the whiskey was being received. And yeah, like a tremendous job. Like there's not one whiskey here I did not enjoy. You know, like they've all got their own little fit where you would have them, and how you drink them. So yeah, wonderful. It was really good to have you on and talk us through.
Well, guys, I'm again, my sincere apologies for my gremlins earlier on, but I'm glad we got here. I was thinking about getting on the phone and doing that weird thing with your phone in your hand, but I'm glad we could get it on the laptop, and hopefully it didn't cause you too much of an issue and make your evening later than it already is.
No, definitely.
So thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us. To everybody that's on here, we do have a Lark tasting coming up next. We do have Chris, the master distiller from the Lark Distillery in Tasmania, who will be with us for a couple of hours, talking us through 6 of their whiskies, one of which was their $1,000 bottle of Glenfarclas cask matured whiskey. So they got casks from Glenfarclas Distillery and sent them over to Australia and matured their whiskey in those casks. So it'll be good to taste that. It's very rare whiskey to be able to taste. If you haven't jumped on to grab a ticket, feel free. However, tomorrow morning when we send you the email with a link to the video, you'll also get a code for that Lark Distillery where you can sign up and get $10 off because you've played a part in tonight's tasting. So that's great. So it'll be exciting tasting to have in 2 weeks. And I hope everybody enjoyed the tasting tonight. We do run these every 2 weeks. So if you do want to get involved in any of them, you're more than welcome. Or if you want to see anybody on here, get in touch and we'll get in touch with them and try to get them on and talk about their whiskey and then have a bit of a taste. But even when I don't think it mattered you were late. It was a great presentation and some great whiskies. Brilliant. Thanks for making the effort to come on and show us them all.
Thanks, Craig.
No worries
Thanks,
at all.
Andy.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Have
a good evening, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you very much. We'll end it
See you
there.
guys.
Thanks. Cheers.
See you in
Good
August.
evening. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.